Welcome to Burning Ledgers, a podcast by CFOs for CFOs exploring how AI is reshaping finance, from technology to strategy to execution. I'm Matthias Steinberg. Each episode, we aim to bring you honest peer-to-peer conversations with forward-thinking finance leaders, experts, and analysts sharing their stories, lessons learned, and predictions for the future. Let's light it up. Today, I'm joined by Heather Holding. Heather is a Chief Risk Officer at Best Egg, having spent her career in risk and compliance management at USAA, the Bancorp, JPMorgan, and Bank of America. Welcome, Heather.
Thanks for having me.
Heather, you are the first Chief Risk Officer that we are that we have on the podcast, and you are also the first Chief Risk Officer that I will be speaking to in quite a while. And I can tell you, I have a lot of questions. This is, as a CFO, now as also a COO at Mindbridge in my company, we are constantly talking about risk. It feels like a lot more than it used to be, as we are navigating how to actually, use AI toolings, completely new AI technology, AI that is actually appearing in tools that we're already using. And it is, and I can tell you, there have been a lot of discussions, and it was very good for me to talk to someone like you. So why don't we start with tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you are doing with your teams and in your company regarding the adoption of AI, and then from that, let's get into the risk aspects and the frameworks that you use to keep everyone safe.
Yeah, absolutely. So my team particularly had started using AI in risk management about 4 years ago. And that's very unusual for a risk organization. Usually the risk organizations are very conservative, not usually the first to start using, AI-like tools. But this is one of the things that I saw early on that needed to be done as a organization, because that is the way of the future. One of the things that I started to do with my team to get them comfortable with leveraging AI tools is to use AI in one of the most basic ways. And that's leveraging AI for everyday real life scenarios. So some of the examples that we've went through with my team are, let's take a picture of the closet at home and see if AI can organize your closet. Or let's take this article that we've seen out on LinkedIn and turn it into some bullet points for a presentation. Or how about let's take this contract that we have with one of our vendors that's 50 pages long, and have it summarize the agreement and what are some of the terms out of the contract. And we've done many of these examples and practiced, and just using these practical ways of leveraging some of the Gen AI tools, we've been actually able to come up with new use cases on how to actually leverage AI. So right now, my risk team is using AI for a ton of things. We're using it for our risk assessments. We're leveraging it to write our risk and control descriptions. We're doing analysis using AI. So we'll highlight all of our risk and control inventory and ask it questions about what we have in the inventory. We're using it for executive summaries, presentations, to come up brainstorming ideas. Just recently, we were brainstorming some ideas around some key risk indicators, and that applies, to any organization. Every organization has key performance metrics, and you could do that for that as well. So there's a number of ways that we've been testing and trying to use AI to help make things a little bit better for us.
And how is that within your team now? You mentioned that you started years ago. Is it like broadly in the team that the whole team now is using and expected to use AI, or is it concentrated early adopters or champions that are carrying most of that development?
Yeah, it's actually expected on the entire team. And we're also a part of a number of groups across our organization that are pushing using AI tools. And we are a huge advocate for exploring and using tools in a safe and effective way, and making sure that we understand the risk associated with leveraging the tools. And we're a huge advocate of it. And we are helping our business partners leverage AI in a way that is done safely for our organization. And I think, we are all on this ride to learn how to use these tools and apply them into our day to day. And I think just using some of these tools in the most basic, practical ways is the best place to start. And it makes it not feel as overwhelming, because I think a lot of people are really, you know, adverse when it comes to new tech, because they just don't know what they don't know. They don't want to, take the risk. But using it in a very simple way to just ease into it and understand like what it can and cannot do, I think it's just a great way to just start.
Yeah. I agree with that. It sounds like you started with your team very playful,
Mhm.
and I think that's a big part of it. In the beginning, it's almost impossible to predict exactly how these tooling can be used and will be used because it's so new. And we are new to it, and also
Yeah.
the tools are evolving all the time, very rapidly. So I think that one of the key takeaways I've had in the last year is you just need to be on the journey. And so, I've started just to try to use, an LLM for almost anything I do, even if I expect
Yeah.
it to fail, because
That's right.
sometimes you really get surprised, but it also shows you, it gives you much better understanding how to use it. So just using it constantly, and I found it becomes like a second nature very quickly.
Mhm.
And you just get used to having that voice or that opinion or that partner constantly with you as you do things.
Yeah, it's kind of like when Google came out, everyone just started just Googling things, and that has, become just a part of day-to-day living. And now even Google has AI built into it. So this is like that next version of a Google.
Yeah,
And you can continue to just try and experiment. I mean, some things work really, really well, and some things don't. Like, I mean, for example, one of the experiments that I've been testing a lot is using it for presentations, like Gen AI for presentations. It is not good at presentations right now. Like, I think there's going to be a long way for that to go, but the future, there's a lot of possibilities there and making things a lot easier for us, but it's just not quite there. But experimenting is
yeah.
definitely the place to go.
And what I find interesting is that you have taken at the same time a role as a champion of using AI, and at the same time, you're the one who's ultimately making sure that these technologies are used in a responsible manner and that the risk is understood, is mitigated, and also is probably calibrated. I think a lot about, and
Yeah.
I've been talking a lot about calibrating risk. And maybe we can start here. What are,
Sure.
in your view, the specific risks that are being introduced by AI that managers, everyone actually who is using AI, need to be aware of and that need to be managed?
Yeah. So there's a number of things, when I think about this. One of the biggest concerns that I hear in the industry is around privacy, data leakage, confidentiality risk. So employees putting confidential information
Yeah,
into public AI tools, proprietary code becoming a part of model training, sensitive documents appearing in generated responses. So, that is really risky, especially with PII, any like financial data, trade secrets. different models, legal strategies. Like those are all things I think everybody's really concerned about.
Yeah.
And I know even just at our organization, we have taken a hard stance against any type of public AI tools for day-to-day business. And a lot of organizations are looking towards more of the enterprise solutions to ensure that their confidentiality remains. Another thing that we are really concerned about is bias and discrimination. The model is only as good as it's trained. It's really easy for a lot of these AI models to produce unfair outcomes based upon its training and any type of variables or what it's reading across the internet, right? So it's really important for us to make sure that when we do get those outputs that we're checking to make sure that we don't have those types of biases, because it does create a ton of additional risk. You're talking regulatory, litigation, reputational, customer harm, all of the above. And there's a lot of things that we can do to mitigate that risk by testing, monitoring, you know, checking the outputs, doing explainability reviews, having that human oversight. That's definitely one of the risks that we need to look at. Another area is explainability, and this is where I see regulators, especially in financial services, really focusing in on. Especially with some of the larger models, you can't always explain how an output is produced. And regulators, especially when you're in kind of a lending type of industry, you have to be able to explain how you got to your outcomes.
Yeah.
That's the same. Like if you think about healthcare, insurance, employment, legal, compliance, all of those things, you have to be able to explain how you got to those outcomes.
Mhm.
I mean, there's
Can
tons. Yeah.
I wanted to before I wanted to circle back to, you just outlined basically three big buckets of risk. The first one was exposing confidential data, internal, like you spoke about PII, you spoke about IP.
Yeah.
What are you concretely doing at Bestech currently, and how are you solving that problem? Promoting the use of these tools while actually making sure that risk is contained.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a lot of monitoring tools around this to make sure that folks aren't leveraging those public models. And some of those are, blocking specific personal AI tools and ensuring that they are only using the enterprise tools. I think it's really hard right now, too. I think that, you know, there's not a ton of tools out there yet. And I think the industry is headed that way. But some of the basic, um, filtering, certain content that, employees are able to access on the web, making sure that, the contracts that we do have in place cover, specific controls, making sure that everybody's in a enterprise AI like type of environment. I think that's where we are at this point. I think this is going to be continuing to be a big area for organizations, especially at larger organizations that are very conservative with their risk appetite, that you're going to just see the increase of tools to monitor this type of stuff in the future.
Yeah, I think of it as it's almost these three layers. You touched upon it. I think we are moving more and more. My understanding is it's more and more possible and feasible that companies host their own models even. And there's more and more companies now supporting that. And it's not just the really big foundational models editors, which also can have, on the side note, a big positive impact on cost.
Yes.
The second layer is then is monitoring. The third layer really is, I think education, very clear policies, and making sure that the whole team is really understanding what the risks are, being extremely clear about that, and what is permitted use and what's not permitted use. And
Exactly.
the interesting thing is, for smaller companies, I think a lot of the first two buckets are less approachable, right? Or it takes more time. At the same time, it is very clear that not using AI poses a big risk to a company as well. The risk of not being competitive, of falling behind. And we will be
Yep.
speaking today. I want to speak to you also about agentic coding, which is a subset, but a really important one. I'm deeply convinced. In the beginning, I thought that type of tooling was great. That's an amazing way to save costs. But now I'm deeply convinced that is, if we are not on the forefront of using that, we cannot be fully competitive with our competitors, but also with our clients. That make or buy decision might really shift as customers use these tools and understand, or believe they can build more software themselves. So I think there is this, smaller companies will be in that tension between, we really have to move, we have these risks, and I think a lot of them will really need to rely on very, very clear guidelines, very clearly defined, what's core IP, what's PII, what are contractual obligations that cannot be done, but the rest actually, you can use these tools. And there is an accepted risk that some, what would be considered confidential information might be exposed to a public model, will be exposed to the model, might be exposed to third parties.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So this is really an interesting tension, but I agree that there needs to be a lot of focus on it, and I think the environment is really rapidly evolving.
It is.
What is the governance framework that works for you, or what can you advise on that? So how are you deciding which tools to use? How are you deciding on how they can be used? How do you do, what are maybe the specific risk assessments that you are doing?
Yeah. And I think when I walk through kind of what we've done as an organization, I think it's where a lot of organizations are also starting. So I think a lot of organizations are kind of looking at this almost like their model risk management programs, and almost kind of mirroring a little bit some of the concepts from model risk management as they stand up their AI governance programs. So one of the things that we did as an organization was we stood up a cross-functional group across the company. So someone from every single department joined our working group around AI governance. And one of the things that we have been talking through and building are, how are we going to assess these models? What level of assessment do these models need, depending on their level of risk? And what we've done is we've kind of categorized the types of things that we want to look at. We've created kind of a risk scale of each of these models and the tiering, and then depending on that tiering, then it goes through a particular level of review. Of course, for some of the riskier models, especially when you're talking about like agentic coding, obviously that's a higher risk model than one where it's just helping you write executive summaries. So we've taken more of a risk-based approach as to how we pursue using different AI use cases. And with those higher risk cases, I mean, those go all the way up to our committee levels for discussion, so everybody understands what that risk is, how we're overseeing it, how we're going to mitigate the risk, and how we're going to use those in different use cases. So it's really developing kind of that transparency across the organization around how these AI tools are being used.
And what you're implicitly also saying is, you have implemented a very rigorous process that probably the unit is by use case or by application is actually doing that assessment and then
Yes.
escalating it
Yep.
as needed.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. I think and you feel that is not stifling the development or the speed at which your organization can actually deploy and learn to use AI.
I don't think so, actually. I mean, I think it's actually brought more awareness around what you can actually use AI for. Because if you think about it, like everybody is on this journey right now of learning AI and the various tools that are out there. And I think it's just a way for folks to understand what's out there, what are the possibilities. And it also brings that excitement to the organization of, here's what we can do differently, here's how we can make things more efficient. And that's really exciting to folks. And I think, most folks are pretty excited to see all the different use cases. And I think it actually speeds it up in a way where you think that, governance will slow things down. In this case, it actually gets people really excited and wanting them to use these tools more because they see the possibilities of what it could be.
Yes. I recently saw a presentation that was speaking about what's the right approach to motivating an organization, and the recommendation was, it should be fear of missing out.
Yeah.
When your teams see what's possible, what others are doing, it creates really this very positive motivation to actually start figuring it out ourselves, adopting it, and so that. You're basically speaking about a governance process, which at the same time is, bringing, good scrutiny and risk management to these
Yeah.
use cases. It also provides visibility and
Correct.
a broader visibility in the organization. That's really interesting. I can see how that helps. What
Yeah.
about
And
AI capabilities in vendors? Is that something that we need to think about, in slightly differently? Obviously, vendors are introducing, anything today. Any software is becoming more and more, or having more and more AI technology built in. Often it is literally, the LLMs at first that get integrated. Sometimes they build their own AI. Sometimes they
yeah.
change their terms of service. So they are in flux as well. How do you think about that? And does everything you just said apply, or is there a specific scrutiny that's required?
Yeah, so I think everything that I spoke to absolutely applies, and there is not a week that goes by where one of our vendors that we have today are introducing new AI features within the tools already that we have.
Yeah.
So we are getting a lot of those updated agreements around their terms around AI and usage. But those are all things that we do need to have oversight on. And those are things that we look at in our third party risk management program. And there's been cases where, we have these existing vendor relationships and tools today where we have made the decisions of we're not going to turn on this AI functionality for this specific tool. And I think, each company needs to make a decision and review based upon their risk appetite on what they're actually comfortable with. And I mean, it really comes down to a lot of this is, making sure that you are comfortable with the risk that you're taking. And in some areas, you may just decide that, it doesn't make sense for you because the risk is too high. For example, like using, AI in financial statements that are going to go into your 10K. Maybe that's an area where you might not want to use it, or at least if you are going to use it, you're going to check it, and you're going to have multiple checks along the way. But there, are, that's something that you should 100% evaluate through your third party risk management program or through your, AI program to make sure that you're understanding those risks, regardless if it's a vendor or not, if it's an internal tool. So yes, that's definitely something that you need to kind of keep an eye on.
Yes, and you just used the term risk appetite on the highest level, and this was something that we just recently needed to do. Is it was an executive level discussion. What actually is our risk appetite, and that's something
Yeah.
that in the age of AI needs to be reevaluated for the very point that
Yeah.
it is absolutely strategic for us, at least, highly strategic that we are adopting it rapidly. And so we did need to rediscuss, are there maybe things that previously we were not willing to accept and now we need to accept, because the risk of not doing it, the risk of falling behind is needs to be weighed against that.
Right. Exactly.
The last thing I really wanted to dig in a little bit with you is agentic coding. I think a lot of what we said generally applies to Cursor or Windsurf or these agentic coding tools. However, it's a bit more specific, and I think it has its very unique challenges as well. Maybe you can speak to that. What are the and I can match that with my recent experience, but what are the specific challenges that brings with it, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it definitely introduces a different risk profile than what you would typically see with, traditional AI assistants. I mean, agentic coding, they're writing, they're modifying, they're testing, they're deploying, they're executing on commands, and have access to different systems and chains. And I mean, it's very complex, and there's a ton of risk around these tools. And this is just even more important to make sure that you have, oversight. I mean, a really good example is, a agent they could put into, they could remove some security controls, they could overwrite some configuration, they could delete your infrastructure. So it definitely poses a lot more risk than some of the more traditional AI models. So it's even more critical with these agentic tools that you have the proper oversight in place, and that you are having that human in the loop to make sure that those types of things aren't happening, because it could be very devastating to an organization, and pose a ton of risk. You know, confidentiality of data, like just your systems going down. Like, I mean, there's just a ton of things that could happen in this type of scenario.
Yeah, and you very much honed in on the agentic, I think, aspect of it,
Mm-hmm.
the AI making decisions and acting upon it in a quite
Mm-hmm.
autonomous manner.
Correct.
And yeah, there's actually one more fundamental layer that I thought was quite interesting, the discussion. It's We were not able to host a local instance we're using Cursor, and we absolutely need to use Cursor. So we need to get comfortable with the fact that we are putting our code into a web-based tool that
Yeah.
is, and even, of course, you will make sure contractually that there's no training, that is not retained, but still you are physically losing control of that code.
Yeah.
One really interesting aspect is we really or rethought and redefined what actually IP is for us. So, and where we came out is the real IP that we have, for example, in our company is limited or concentrated really in a small core. That's really the algorithms. That's the unsupervised
Mm-hmm.
machine learning that can detect anomalies in financial data. But all the code around it, we don't consider core IP. So the core IP we will never put in these tools, but the rest of the IP of the code, we are willing to accept that we use it in these tools, and we can accept that even if it were to get leaked, it's not really a loss of absolute core IP. I mean,
Correct.
someone seeing how we've built our front end, that's really not our reason to exist. Us being able to find anomalies that no one else can, that is.
Yes, that's exactly how we actually approached it too. So we're a user of Cursor as well.
Yeah.
And we took exactly that same approach. Like, what can you use this for and what can you not use this for? And, really defined like what is IP and what is not IP and what are we comfortable with from a risk perspective.
Great, Heather. We're just coming up on time, but there's one last question I really wanted to ask
Sure.
you. What is AI with Heather?
Oh, AI with Heather. So this is my AI series where I teach users how to use pretty much Gen AI in a very practical and simple way. So basically, kind of like some of the examples that I shared of how I got my team comfortable about taking a picture of their closet and organizing it, or taking a contract and summarizing it. So what I do is I have a weekly series on LinkedIn. It's also on YouTube as well. Where I just show users how to use AI in the most simplest ways so they can start to get comfortable with it in their day-to-day lives.
Great. So we'll put a link into the show notes to your podcast.
Love that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. This episode was brought to you by MindBridge, the leader in AI-powered financial decision intelligence. To learn more, visit online at mindbridge.ai. I'm Matthias Steinberg. This was Heather Holding, and this has been Burning Ledgers. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend about the show.